to her. She was dragged outside and across the cobbled yard, the wardress still scolding and shaking her vigorously. The men clustered about the door, grinning at the spectacle. As she approached the trough in the corner of the courtyard, lugging Mary under her arm, the wardress produced a coarse handkerchief from her pocket and clamped it over Mary's nose and mouth. A new smell, sweet and cold, flooded her nostrils. She struggled for a moment, briefly bewildered by the expression in the woman's eyes, and then the sky went black. Was this death? Her mouth felt thick, as did her head. Her fingertips were numb. She twitched them experimentally and realized with a small shock that her wrists were no longer shackled. Indeed, she was floating, swaddled in linen and soft blankets. She turned her cheek to one side and rubbed against the pillow, cat-like. The scent was pleasant and totally unfamiliar. No lake of burning fire so far, no heavenly choir either. She saw no reason to move or even to open her eyes. Mary? She hadn't considered that God might be female. Slowly, reluctantly, she raised heavy eyelids and focused on the speaker. The woman had changed her lavender morning dress for something darker, but it was she, the lady who'd winked at her from the gallery. That meant this was neither hell nor heaven. How do you feel? The question seemed irrelevant. Mary let her gaze slide around the room, large, simply furnished, lit by candles, and back to the winker. I don't know. Your head might ache. Chloroform sometimes has that effect, although we use as little as possible. Chloroform, a fancy word for a dangerous substance. She'd heard whispers of potions that knocked one out, but always dismissed them as wishful lies. You must be thirsty. The winker offered a glass of something pale and cloudy. At Mary's hesitation, she smiled. It's quite safe to drink. To demonstrate, she took a sip. Mary's first taste was tentative. Then, as the cool liquid filled her mouth, she guzzled it greedily. Lemonade. She'd had it once before, a couple of years ago. Now she was sorry when it was all gone. Wiping her mouth, she looked at the lady. She still felt fuzzy-headed, but her curiosity was strong. Why? Why don't I begin with who and where? Then I'll get to why and how. Mary nodded. She felt mocked. The lady sat down beside the bed. My name is Anne Treleaven, she began, and I am the head teacher here at Miss Grimshaw's Academy for Girls. Our founder was an eccentric and wealthy woman whose desire was to help women achieve a measure of independence. Education for girls in our country is generally very inferior, even for the rich, and many girls receive none at all. So Miss Grimshaw founded a school. She spoke quietly, but her eyes were sharp, and they rarely left Mary's face. We are a little like a charity school, since most of our students would not normally be able to afford our fees. However, we are a very unusual institution, in that we often select our students, instead of waiting for them to come to us. We search for girls who would most benefit from the special training we offer. She paused. We have chosen you. Mary scowled. I suppose you think that's generous. What makes you think I want to be chosen? Suppose I want to hang. Instead of shock and outrage, Anne's face showed mild amusement. Don't bristle. We don't intend to keep you here by force. You may leave at any time and go directly to the gallows if you wish. But I hope you will at least listen to me for a few minutes before choosing. Mary felt both churlish and childish. She shrugged. My colleagues have been watching you for some time. You know one of them as the wardress at the Old Bailey, of course. Another observed you in Newgate Prison during the weeks before your sentencing. They were both struck by your intelligence. They were also intrigued by the fact that you pled guilty instead of insisting upon a trial. Most people charged with capital crimes insist upon their innocence, whether they are truly innocent or not. But you didn't. Why not, Mary? After a pause, Mary shrugged again. Maybe I was fed up. Anne's eyes glinted. With lying? Stealing? She refilled Mary's glass and passed it to her. Or perhaps with living? Mary's blink was the equivalent of a full confession from another, less hardened girl. You are surprisingly resigned to death for one so young.